Hey guys, so today I am back to talk about how to scale your Ignite damage. Now, doing these experiments, I have found that Ignite works very similarly to Poison in many ways, and it makes sense, right? They're both damaging ailments, so obviously scaling them is going to be very similar to one another. So here are the different ways that I've found that you can scale Ignite damage. So first off is going to be fire damage from the initial hit, and with that, crits also work with it. Second is going to be the Ignite and ailment magnitude. Third is going to be duration. Fourth is going to be area damage. Fifth is going to be resistances. Sixth is going to be gem levels, obviously. And at the bottom here, I wanted to mention that no, Ignite does not work like Poison. Unfortunately, they do not stack. And I'll show you how that works and looks like. And then lastly, we're going to be talking a little bit about conversion. So I want to talk a little bit about how that works with scaling and whether or not you can scale with fire damage, ignite damage, or do you have to scale with the damage that you converted to. So let's get started, right? So the first one, fire damage from the initial hit. And that basically is the definition of ignite. So if you open up your skills and you take a look at what the tooltip for ignited means, it says right here, Ignite is an ailment that deals fire damage over time and lasts for 4 seconds by default. Fire damage from hits contributes to both the chance to ignite and the magnitude. So hits dealing more fire damage will ignite more often and inflicting stronger ignites as well. So by default, a hit has a 1% chance to ignite for every 4% of the target's ailment threshold. So every target in the game has an ailment threshold. And when you do 4% of that ailment threshold in damage, then you have a 1% chance to ignite. So by default, if you do 400%, you will always ignite that target. Now, magnitude for ignite works very similar to poison. So the magnitude of the ignite is the fire damage per second equal to 20% of the fire damage that was dealt by the hit that inflicted it. So, much like our poison situation, if you deal 100 damage and it ignites the enemy, the ignite will do 20 damage over that 4 seconds. Very simple, basically the same thing. So now let's put this into practice. And the skills that I'm going to be using today are going to be mostly Flame Wall. We're going to be using Solar Orb as well for certain examples. And we're also going to be using Incinerate for certain examples. Flame Wall and Incinerate are nice because they pretty much only do ignite damage, whereas Solar Orb does have a hit portion of it. We'll go into that in a little bit, but mostly we're going to be using Flame Wall. Now, Flame Wall ignites as though dealing 33 to 39 fire damage on this level 4 gem, right? So basically, it doesn't hit the enemy, but it ignites as though hitting an enemy because that's how ignite works, right? If you do a higher hit damage, then the ignite is going to be higher. So it's going to be igniting the enemy as though you did that much damage. So we're going to go walk in and drop a Flame Wall. So let's do that now. And then as you can see, the Flame Wall is going to be ticking down the enemy until it expires. And that Flame Wall did a little bit over 200 damage, right? So let's do a couple more tests to just get our range of damage that the Flame Wall can do. That way we kind of, know what our top and bottom is for this and what's reasonable. So this one is going to hit about 240, okay? So a little bit higher. And then we'll do it one more time. And I'm doing it for the entirety of the duration of Flame Wall because that way it's just consistent. The other skills are a little bit tougher to do because it's a little bit tougher to just get like an exact number or a consistent number. So it does somewhere between like 210, 240, right? So that's kind of the range that we're working off of by default. So as I mentioned in our notepad, first off, fire damage from the initial hit will increase the ignite damage if we increase that initial hit, right? So even though it doesn't really hit per se, it still does damage as though it were hitting the enemy. So as you can see right here in our tooltip, it says over here, the amount of fire damage we are doing is 57 to 85. And then the estimated ignite per second is going to be 15 to 23. So if we put on considered casting, that increases the amount of damage our spell hits do, right? We're not increasing the magnitude of the skill. we're increasing the amount of the hit damage it is, you can see that when we put it on here, it'll actually increase both the fire damage, so the total damage over here, the fire damage, and then this ignite number. Take it off and put it on, right? You can see that it's different. And then we're going to go up to the boss. We're going to drop it on the boss again. And you'll see now the boss's health is draining a lot faster, as well as also doing a lot more damage. So as you can see, 326, significantly higher, right? So even though the spell doesn't really quote unquote hit, it still increases the damage of the ignite because it technically calculates the damage as though the skill hits the boss. So again, we can take it off, and then you can see our damage is back down to the bottom. Now, this also changes with crit, but it does not change for the crits for Flame Wall and Incinerate. Unfortunately, skills that don't actually end up hitting the boss can't actually crit. So you can also see this in that there is no crit stat here, whereas if we go look at Solar Orb, you actually have a crit chance number here, right? And I've scaled up my crit chance pretty high on this build, so it's at 20% right here. It's not the base crit chance. And so obviously, if we follow this, if we are able to crit with it from the initial hit, then that will do more ignite damage. Now, let me prove to you guys that you actually can't crit. So as I mentioned, my Solar Orb has 20% crit, so my crit chance overall for spells is 20%. And I'm going to pop Flame Wall on this boss, let's say 10 to 20 times, and you're going to see that the damage doesn't increase at all, ever. It'll never proc a crit. Now, maybe I'm just really, really unlucky, and I'm never procking a crit in that 10 to 20 times, but I think it's pretty improbable that with a 20% crit chance that I never proc a crit within 20 times of hitting the boss. So I'm just going to go and do a speed up montage of this happening now. So there it is, guys. As you saw, there was no crits in there ever. So now let me show you the difference between a crit and a non-crit with something like Flame Orb that's, you know, it does hit the enemy, or at least part of it does. And you'll see that when it crits versus doesn't crit, there's a huge difference between the damage. So that right there is a non-crit. So it did about 102 damage. So now let's try to fish for a crit. There we go. Now that's the difference between a crit and a non-crit. So that did 293 damage. Quite a bit more compared to what the variance was between the Flame Wall. So no, Flame Wall cannot crit, and skills that just ignite cannot crit. But if you do end up critting on the hit, that will increase the magnitude of the overall ignite damage. Now, the next one is going to Ignite and Ailment Magnitude. So this is much like Poison, right? There's Poison Magnitude and Ailment Magnitude for that one. It works the same way for Ignite. So if we go and increase our Ignite Magnitude, then you're going to be able to see that number go up. So let's go into our skill tree. We're going to put some nodes into Ignite Magnitude. So 20% increase Ignite Magnitude. And then again, we're going to use our skill Flame Wall. We're going to pop it onto the boss, and you're going to see that this is going to do a significantly higher amount of damage at the end of the day. So right now, you're going to see it go up to like 269, okay? So that was 1 point. Before we were reaching, I think, 250 as our max. Let's throw in another one here as well to see what the range is, right? Again, with all our skills, there's going to be a high and a low range. So skills aren't always going to be hitting that same number every single time. 252 right there. So a little bit lower. Then we're going to go to the boss again, drop it one more time. There we go, 275, right? That was never hit with our original number when we didn't have the ignite magnitude on there. And something you will also notice is that this number also changed when we increased the ignite magnitude. It went up a little bit off of that as well. Now, that didn't change the amount of fire damage that we did, but the ignite damage that we do is going to be increased. And this tooltip is, I would say, pretty useful a lot of times for checking out your damage, but at the same time, sometimes it is wrong. So it is good to kind of go through this process of checking things to make sure they actually reflect correctly. So there we go. Ignite magnitude does work in increasing the amount of damage that you do. Now, the next thing is going to be duration. So let's go back and unspec off of those ignite points. That way we can see our baseline again and compare it to that baseline that we had earlier. Okay, so we have unspec'd off of those two ignite magnitude points up on our tree up here. And then we're gonna go and try doing this with duration increase by putting temporal chains on the boss. So let's apply temporal chains. Then we're going to put our flame wall on the boss. I'm just going to reapply it one time to make sure that it doesn't expire before the ignite goes past. So as you can see, that went to 270. So quite a bit higher than the 250 number that we had before. These numbers are going to be kind of like smaller increases because we don't have a super high level, flame wall ability. When you increase the amount of damage, obviously the number is going to go up by quite a bit. So there we go, 278, and even the temporal chains had fallen off a little bit. But honestly, it shouldn't really matter because as long as when you ignite the boss, it has temporal chains, it shouldn't really matter if the temporal chain comes off because you're not reapplying the ignite to them. The ignite is staying from the initial flame wall. So as you can see there, it just never drops below that 250 point, which before, when we didn't have temporal chains on the boss, there was a chance that the number was like 230 or something like that. So as you can see, temporal chains and increasing the duration right there, right, 228, increasing the duration of your debuffs does increase the overall damage of the ignite. Now, next one is going to be area damage. So let's go put on our concentrated effect on our flame wall, and we will see the difference in number here. So there we go. We're going to put it onto the boss, and you can already tell, right? The boss's HP is ticking down much, much faster. And there you go, right? It's above 300, 345. So things like concentrated effect will increase the amount of damage that ignites do. As long as it is a AoE spell, it will increase the damage that the ignite does. Now let's take off concentrated effect and we're gonna go and put on flammability. And this will be when we talk about resistances. So even though the flammability ability, it reduces the enemy's fire resistance and not like ignite resistance, this will still increase the amount of overall ignite damage that you do. Obviously, you're going to be reducing the fire resistance, and if your initial hit is fire, it's going to be doing more damage. So we're going to go apply flammability to the boss, and then we're going to put the flame wall there. And again, you can see the number, the health is dropping quite a bit faster than if we didn't have it on there, and boom, 332. So fire resistance and reducing that will also in turn increase the amount of damage that your ignites do. And then, of course, gem levels, that will increase the amount of damage that your ignites do as well. So we're going to go put this fire mastery onto flame wall, and then you will be able to see that flame wall will have its damage increased once you have a plus level gem onto it. So this is going to be doing 290, 302 damage. So quite a bit more. And in general, in Path of Exile, most skills scale very, very well with levels. So if you have an opportunity to get anything that's like a plus level to spells or plus level to like melee skills or whatever it might be that you're using, it's going to be a very good idea for you to get some sort of plus levels to the abilities that you're using to increase your damage. Now, finally, the last point that I want to make, and this is probably something that might be misunderstood by a lot of people, is that ignites don't actually stack at all. So what I mean by that is, let's say you put down 2 flame walls, that is not going to really increase the amount of damage that you do. You would think that putting down 2 flame walls would be doubling your damage, right? Because if you put down 1 flame wall, it does about 230 damage. If you do 2 flame walls, it'll double that, right? But as you can see here, it does not double it. 257, right? That is still within the kind of window of what our damage range is. And also, you know, it might be a little bit higher in our test because we are putting the flame walls one after another, so the duration is going to be increased a little bit. But the overall damage and the logic of if I put down 2 flame walls, it should be doubling the damage, right? If it's stacked, well, clearly it's not doubling it, so it's not stacking. But one thing you do have to note is that a higher magnitude will overwrite the lower magnitude. So if we put 2 of the same magnitude, which is our flame wall in our previous example, obviously it didn't really increase our damage, right? But if we go and put in a higher magnitude burn, then that will increase it. So that's where Incinerate comes in. So we're going to put down the flame wall and then we're going to hold Incinerate on it. As you see, it starts ticking down a lot faster because the amount of damage and the magnitude of the burn on the Incinerate is just a lot higher than that of the flame wall. As you can see here, Incinerate does quite a bit more ignite per second compared to the flame wall, which has, you know, 23. Incinerate has 35 up to. So if you have a higher ignite magnitude, that will end up taking over and overwriting. And you can see that, again, they don't stack because, look, the ignite icon, unlike poison, doesn't have like a 1 on it, right? Or a 2 on it. It just stays as the ignite icon. So unfortunately, even if you are trying to use 2 ignite skills at once, they don't stack. It'll just get taken over by the one that is higher magnitude of ignite. And something that's really, really weird, actually, when we talk about magnitudes of ignites, I don't know why Flame Wall can't seem to use Searing Flame, but Incinerate can. I understand. At first I was thinking like, oh, maybe it's because it says hit. But the thing is, this also says spell hits, right? And it can be used on Flame Wall. So I'm not entirely sure why that's the case. Maybe it's a bug. Maybe GGG can get to it and kind of fix it. But yeah, so all in all, you're not able to stack ignites. So now let's talk about conversions. So there are items in the game that'll convert your ignite damage to another element. For example, like this one, Black Flame, it converts your ignite damage from fire damage to chaos damage, right? And let's go and test out the amount of damage that we do at a baseline first, because obviously bosses do have different levels of resistances to different damage. So now that we're doing chaos damage, as you can see, the boss is taking a little bit less damage than before. Before we were able to make it above 200 for the most part. Right now, I think we're going to be consistently hitting below 200. So 183 right there. And then we'll do one more time. And then after that, we are going to go and try scaling that damage. So this one is probably going to be doing less from what I can tell, 160, right? Now, let's go and start scaling our damage. So first off, let's try scaling fire damage. Let's see if increasing the amount of fire damage that we do will increase the overall damage that we do with our flame wall. So let's go here and increase our fire damage. Let's see how much damage we do now. So right there, we are going above 200 now. So let's try a couple more times and see if it, was that like a super high roll, or is it consistently hitting above 200 at this point? So that one went to 218, so even higher. Let's do it one more time. That one went 210. So as you can see, it is consistently hitting above 200 now that we have increased the amount of fire damage that we do overall. So with that, we can increase the amount of damage that our ignites do, even though our damage is being converted into chaos. It will take that ignite number from before it gets converted into chaos, then it will be increased by that amount of fire damage, and then it'll convert it to chaos damage. Now, what about chaos damage? Can I now scale chaos damage to increase the amount of damage that we do with our ignites, therefore double dipping the amount of damage that we do? Well, unfortunately, the answer is no to that. So let's go and prove this by increasing the amount of chaos damage that we do. So we are increasing it by quite a significant margin, right? Let's even put these chaos damage nodes down here. That way we can for sure see if the damage is increased, because if we do more chaos damage, with that, it should be by a significant amount. So let's go and pop the flame wall onto the boss. As you can see, it's still doing in the low 200s. So even though we increased the amount of chaos damage that we did, we are not doing more damage than before. And this has to do with the simple principle that we talked about at the beginning. So we said right here, fire damage from the initial hit scales the damage of the ignite, right? Well, our initial hit, unfortunately, doesn't do any chaos damage. And also, even if it did, it wouldn't scale it because, as we can see here, ignites only fire damage contributes to the magnitude of ignite. So even if we did do chaos damage from the initial hit, it wouldn't increase the amount of fire damage that we do. And now that we are increasing the amount of chaos damage that we're doing because we are now turning our ignite damage into chaos damage with the black flame ring, we're still not increasing the amount of ignite damage that we do because ignite is only calculated by the initial hit or by magnitude. If you increase the magnitude, then you could increase the damage of the ignite. But if you don't, then you have to be increasing the damage of the hit and only the fire portion of that hit. So that about wraps this video up, guys. Hopefully y'all found this interesting and informative. And if you like this type of video, be sure to hit the sub button. That definitely helps the channel a lot, as well as let me know down in the comment section below with your thoughts, and if you have any other questions that I might not have covered in this video. Happy to answer those. I read pretty much all the comments. So yeah, but the other way to support the channel is to come hang out on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/MisoXshiru. I'd love to see you guys there. I stream every night starting at 10 p.m. PST. So hopefully we can hang out there. But if not, hopefully I see y'all on the next video. All right, guys. Peace out.